Moonlight. Abbé Marignan's name suited him well. It had a resolute, militant ring. He was a tall, gaunt man of fanatical, yet sincere and fervent faith. His convictions were unshakable. He believed he knew his God, understood his designs, his will, and his intentions. When he strode briskly down his garden path, a question would sometimes surface in his soul. Why did God create this or that? He would ponder it stubbornly, mentally putting himself in the Creator's place, and almost always found an explanation. He was not one to exclaim in humble resignation, "O Lord, thy ways are past finding out." No, he would tell himself, "I am God's servant, and I must understand his will. And if I do not, it is my duty to discern it." It seemed to him that everything in nature was arranged with astonishing logic. Every why had its because. Dawn was for pleasant awakening, day for ripening the harvest, rain for watering it, evening for preparing to sleep, and the dark night for sleep itself. The four seasons corresponded perfectly to the needs of agriculture. He would not entertain the thought that nature might be without purpose. On the contrary, in his view, all living things had adapted themselves to the demands of time, climate, and matter. But he hated women deeply, unconsciously, instinctively. He often repeated the words of the Savior, "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" and would add, "It seems even God himself was not entirely pleased with his creation." To him, woman was that triply unclean creature, as the poet wrote. She was the temptress who had led the first man astray, and was still continuing her accursed work. A weak, dangerous, unsettling being. Yet what he hated most was not her body, but her loving soul. He sensed their tenderness directed at him, and though he considered himself invulnerable, he was still irked by that quivering need for love he felt in them. According to his conviction, God had created woman solely as a test for man. One must approach her with caution, as one would snare. Her embraces, her half-parted lips, all of it resembled a trap. He made an allowance only for nuns, rendered harmless by their vows. Yet even towards them he was severe, sensing that deep within their humble hearts, that same tenderness still smoldered, even towards him, despite his holy office. He detected this tenderness in their gaze, more liquid with piety than that of the monks, in their ecstasy, in their bursts of love for Christ, which irritated him as a form of female passion. He felt it in their meekness, the softness of their voices, their downcast eyes, their resigned tears when he reprimanded them sternly. Leaving the convent, he would shake the dust from his cassock and quicken his pace, as if fleeing from danger. He had a niece who lived with her mother in a small house nearby. He fervently wished to make a sister of mercy of her. She was pretty, lively, and mischievous. When the abbé admonished her, she would laugh. And when he grew angry, she would kiss him fervently, pressing him to her breast. He would instinctively try to free himself from these embraces, though deep down he felt a tender joy, awakening in him a paternal feeling that lies dormant in every man. He often spoke to her of God, of his God, while walking along country lanes. She never listened, but gazed at the sky, the grass, the flowers, her eyes shining with the joy of life. Sometimes she would dart off to catch a flying insect, and, having caught it, would say, "Look, uncle, how pretty it is. I feel like kissing it." And this urge to kiss flies, to kiss lilac blossoms, disturbed, agitated, and revolted the priest. He saw in it, too, that same ineradicable female tenderness, blooming in their hearts. Then, one day, the sexton's wife, who kept house for the abbé, informed him that his niece had a lover. The abbé stood frozen in horror, his face covered in lather, preparing to shave. When he had finally recovered his senses enough to think and speak, he cried out, "It's not true. You're lying, Melanie." But the peasant woman placed a hand on her breast and calmly replied, "As God is my judge, if I am lying, Monsieur le Curé. She goes to him every evening after your sister has gone to bed. They meet by the river. You need only go there yourself between 10 and midnight." He stopped scraping his chin and began pacing the room abruptly, as he always did in moments of deep contemplation. Returning to his shaving, he cut his cheek 3 times from nose to ear. He remained silent all day, consumed by indignation and inner fury. To the priest's wrath against the unconquerable power of love was added the irritation of a mentor, guardian, and spiritual father who had been tricked, deceived, and made a laughingstock by a mere child. He felt like a parent whose daughter suddenly announces she has chosen a husband without his knowledge or involvement. After dinner, he tried to read, but could not concentrate. His irritation only grew. When the clock struck 10, he took his walking stick, a heavy oak cudgel, his constant companion on nocturnal visits to the sick. He glanced with a grim smile at the massive club, brandished it threateningly in his powerful fist, and then, gritting his teeth, brought it down with force upon a chair. The backrest splintered and fell to the floor. He opened the door to leave, but halted on the threshold, struck by the radiance of the wondrous moonlit night. And possessing a sensitive soul akin to that of poets and church fathers, he was shaken and stirred by the majestic, pure beauty of the pale light. The fruit trees in his small garden, bathed in the gentle glow, cast delicate shadows with their branches, barely clad in new foliage. The giant honeysuckle, climbing the wall of the house, exuded a sweet, intoxicating fragrance, and in the warm, luminous air, one could sense the breath of a perfumed soul. He drew a deep breath, drinking in the air like a drunkard wine, and walked slowly, filled with admiration, enchanted, almost forgetting about his niece. Reaching the open fields, he stopped to gaze upon the valley, flooded with the tender light, immersed in the soft, languorous charm of the clear night. The frogs kept up their short, metallic croaking, and from afar mingled with them came the melody of a nightingale. Light, lively, made for kisses, provoking aimless dreams, enhancing the enchantment of the moonlight. The abbé walked on. His heart grew faint, and he did not understand why. He felt weak, drained. He wanted to sit down, to remain there and simply look, to contemplate God in his creation. Farther on, following the curves of the river, stretched a slender line of poplars. A thin white mist, pierced by the moonbeams, silvery and shimmering, hung over the banks, enveloping the river's winding course in a light, transparent haze. The priest stopped once more, seized to his very core by an irresistible and growing tenderness. He was overcome by doubt, a troubling vagueness. He felt one of those questions he used to ask himself stirring within him. Why did God create this? If the night is meant for sleep, for unconscious rest, for oblivion of all things, then why make it more beautiful than the day, sweeter than the dawn and the twilight? Why this quiet, enchanting orb, more poetic than the sun? It is so discreet, as if meant to illuminate things too delicate and mysterious for harsh light. Why does it lend such clarity to the darkness? Why does the most skillful songbird not rest like the others, but sing in the anxious half-light? Why this transparent veil cast over the world? Why this faintness of heart, this stirring of the soul, this languor of the flesh? To what end this seduction, when men do not see it, surrendered to sleep in their beds? For whom is this majestic spectacle intended, this abundance of poetry poured from the heavens upon the earth? The abbé found no answer. But then, at the edge of the meadow, under the arch of trees steeped in the gleaming mist, two figures appeared. The man was taller and had his arm around his companion's neck, kissing her forehead from time to time. They suddenly brought the motionless landscape to life, as if they were the living center for which this divine setting had been created. They seemed a single being, the one for whom this quiet, silent night was intended. And they walked toward the priest like a living answer, sent by the Lord to his questioner. He stood there, his heart beating faster and more insistently, as if responding to something momentous. It seemed to him that a scene from the Bible was unfolding before his eyes, something reminiscent of the love of Ruth and Boaz, the fulfillment of the Creator's will amidst a majestic, almost sacred nature. Lines from the Song of Songs surfaced in his memory, passionate cries, the calls of the flesh, the blazing poetry of ardent tenderness. He thought, perhaps God created such nights to cloak human love with a perfect veil. He began to retreat from the couple approaching him in each other's embrace. It was his niece, but now he asked himself, was he acting against God's will? Was the Lord himself not blessing this love, surrounding it with such enchanting signs? He hurried away, confused, almost ashamed, as if he had intruded upon a temple where he was not permitted to enter. Friends, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Share your impressions and thoughts in the comments. I'll be happy to chat with you.